Hey everyone, my name is Christine Javier, and today I'm going to work on Free Code Camp's Seek and Destroy. So here you're provided with an initial array, the first argument in the destroyer function, followed by one or more arguments. So your goal is to remove all of the elements from the initial array that are of the same value as these arguments. So just looking at the test cases really quick. Our first one here, we have 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. That's our first element of, or that's our first argument, and that's in an array. And then our second and third argument are 2 and 3. So you're trying to pick out these values from the array, remove it, and return whatever's left over, which would just be 1 and 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and start working on that. I'm just going to copy this and work in my text editor. All right, so just a quick peek. Free Code Camps wants you to practice using the arguments object as well as the filter method. So let's go ahead and play around with that. So the arguments object is essentially just an object that entails all of the arguments that are in the input. So a funny thing to think about is that you're given this function which only has one parameter, which is the parameter r. And it's weird because you're like, oh, but there are 3 arguments though, even though there's only one parameter. I'm used to seeing it being equal, you know? Like if I knew that there were 2 parameters, I'd expect 2 arguments. Anyhow, the point is there's a way to save the data of these arguments so that you're just not left out, because this here r would just represent the very first argument, which would be just this array. So arguments is cool because, yeah, it allows you to manipulate all of the inputs that the user could put in. Okay, so we're going to play around with that. My immediate goal is to, save all the arguments. And I wonder if I could just show you what R would look like, just to prove that point. What I'd expect to see is, just by returning R, we'd only expect to see the very first argument of this destroyer input. Get a console.log. Oops. Yeah, so as I'd expect, R, since it only represents that very first argument, will just be that very first element of this argument here. And we're going to play with arguments to get all of that data. What I want to do is transform it into an array. So I'm going to call this, declare a variable, call it args, and we're going to do this here, array.isFrom. This turns your input into an array, and I'm just simply going to put arguments. Now I want to just see what args looks like. .isFrom. Hold on just a second. Let me Google that. Array.from. There we go. Excuse me for that. But yeah, array.from just it takes in an argument and it will transform whatever that is into an array. So this here traps all of these arguments here and it puts it into one big array. So we have one array. The first element is the first argument, which in itself is an array. Second argument is the second argument here. Third argument is the third argument. So this is exactly what I want. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to make some nested for loops. And we're just going to start by saying for var I equals 0. Let's make I less than the length of the very first element, which is an array. So I'm going to do args 0 at position 0. And the length of that, and we're going to iterate through the entirety of it. All right, now let's make another for loop. This here is to get the second and third element of this array. For var j equals 0. Actually, let's make j equal 1 because we want to start always at that after the initial array argument. And then I'll do j is less than args.length j plus plus. And essentially what we're saying is, okay, we're going to iterate through this, and we're saying, okay, if the element is equal to either of these two, let's delete it. Okay, so we're going to say if args 0 I equals args j, let's delete that. Delete args 0 I. Cool. So let's see what this looks like now. Let me run it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. Return. Okay, and let me return args at position 0 because we don't care for these other arguments. Cool. So good. So we've managed to take out the numbers we wanted. However, as you can see, we're just left with these like empty spaces. So let's go play around with that. Instead of simply returning this array that, yeah, it's been mostly manipulated, let's return it such that we get rid of these empty spaces. So we're going to return args at position 0, and we're going to filter at this point. I'm going to write an anonymous function. I'm just going to call the input x. And what I'm returning here is I'm going to return whether or not x is evaluated to true. And let me run this and show you what's going to happen. Good. Exactly how I expected. All those spaces are gone. You're probably wondering what's happening here. Well, the first thing is filter. It iterates through the entirety of the array, and it applies a function to each element of that array. X here represents each element, or the element that is currently being evaluated. And filter is the one that applies this anonymous function to each element. Hopefully that wasn't too redundant. But anyway, this is the interesting line. When you're using Boolean, it's really just a test of truthness and falseness. And the cool thing with computer science is empty strings, not a number, undefined. Those things all evaluate to false. So I'm saying, okay, if there's a number that actually exists, if there's actually a space that's being occupied, return it. Otherwise, if it's empty or anything else that's falsy, just get rid of it. And that's why all those empty spaces are now gone. Okay, so let me go ahead and test to see if this works on FreeCodeCamp. Cool. So it totally works. Hopefully that helped you out. All right, have a good day.